Welcome back to Digging Deeper, Episode 5, Employment Trends. Today we have Emily Gordon, Senior Vice President of Talent Partners, and we have Steve Squier, Director of Talent Partners. We talk about all the current trends in employment and specifically what our new Talent Partners division can do for you. All right, Emily, you have extensive background in employment and hiring. Tell us all about it, every detail. Don't leave out any details. Go.
So all the details are 24 years. I just passed my 24th year in recruiting as February 23rd, 1998, if you're really taking the facts down.
All right.
But I started off in technical recruiting in Los Angeles. I learned in a really kind of a boiler room environment, just picking up the phone, getting to know how to ask things and talk to people and treat them with respect was really the thing that I learned early on is when you talk to a candidate and you treat them not as a commodity. And so I went from that to Six Sigma, process design, things like that, and then have worked across a lot of industries and helping people just try to do better, treat people better, and therefore hire better.
It's interesting you use the word commodity. I did some content back in 2020, and that was kind of the big thing that we were talking about is like drivers as a commodity mindset. So it's interesting that even in other industries that idea of like employees as commodities gets sunk in. All right, Steve, why don't you tell us about your extensive background in hiring and employment?
Well, I've outdone Emily here. I've got about 30 years in talent acquisition and attraction, and it's been everything from temp to perm hiring all the way up through executive search. And the last 10 years has been in talent account management and really just on the talent side of keeping the business process efficient and really keeping people honest in what they're doing. As Emily said, right, we have to treat people with dignity and realize that this is their livelihood. It's how they put food on the table and the roof over the head. So it's really important to remember that that balance as you're talking to people, where you keep your customer happy, but you also keep the candidates happy.
Right. And with the way you say roof, I can pretty much guess where in the country you're from.
Take a guess.
Somewhere in the Midwest?
That would be it. Should I call it roof?
That's right.
No? Okay.
No, I was actually born up in Indiana, so
okay.
I hear all that roofing.
I never knew I had an accent.
There it is.
It's just that one word got me. All right, so it's pretty much fair to say that both of you are experts when it comes to employment. Is that fair to say? I think that's fair to say.
I'll take
it. Yeah, I'll take it.
Experts.
Yeah.
All right. And since you both have been in there, past 20 years, what have been the trends of the last 10, maybe even 5 years that you guys have noticed with how companies are looking at employment? What are the strategies that are working?
I would say that, first and foremost, right, when I first started in this industry, everybody was talking about the baby boomer exodus from the workforce. And I thought, wow, I'll never be around to see that, right? Well, we're right in the middle of it. There just are not enough people to fill jobs across just about every industry right now. So it's, it's really turned into a candidate marketplace, which is when I introduced myself and said I was talent attraction, that really has kind of been the shift is how do we position our employers or our customers as employers of choice,
right? So
that candidates are coming to us to look for the jobs because they've got choices,
right? And
they've got many choices. So speed is an urgency is a commodity right now, and as you've got to be fast, you've got to be efficient, and as Emily said earlier, you got to treat people like people.
Yeah, and I'm no demographic expert, but I believe, if I'm correct, that the baby boomer generation, I mean, this will change obviously here soon, but the baby boomer generation outnumbered Generation X, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, by a long, which you almost never see the previous generation outnumbering the current generation, or they're not current anymore, but when the baby boomers start leaving, it definitely leaves a huge gap.
Now the good news is the millennials, that is a larger generation than Gen X, so thank goodness there's reinforcements on the way. But for now, right? Trying to find that experience and that industry knowledge that typically is required to be successful in your job there's a little bit of a dearth there, I think.
Okay, and I'll hand the question over to you, Emily. What have you seen in the last 5 years as far as employment as a whole, strategies? What are you seeing?
So I think with the thought process around diversity and inclusion, that's been a huge thing for a lot of employers, and trying to create safe spaces for people. So as we have a diminishing workforce or talent availability, you have to look at what's not in the room or what's not at your table or at your company and figure out why. And if there's a value to that population, how are you going to make it a better experience for them? So I think there's been a lot of focus, and the pandemic certainly accelerated that, in that we need more people to work. And we have to figure out why they're not choosing us, and figure out how to go make those places safe.
Right.
I think that's one. I think the other is using social media more and more. People often go to the newest thing. We were talking earlier today about TikTok, and is it actually something we should use or not? And getting good at how you use social media, or turning towards the trends. You have to just watch and make sure that you're not over-correcting or trying something that's really not your brand. And you have to be good at that. So how to use social media, how to use that employment brand versus just your overall brand to attract talent. Those are things that are always going to be important for us, and we need to keep looking at. Then on top of that, like Steve said, there's so many choices now for people. And so back when I started recruiting in the late 90s, it was a .com boom, and you were able to, the candidates were calling the shots. We're back to that. And so, there's cycles in hiring and talent acquisition you have to watch. And luckily, with the experience we have, we're able to figure out what worked before and what we need to do going forward.
And the current cycle is definitely, like you said, the candidates have the power.
Absolutely right.
Right. And you mentioned something earlier. You talked about the great exodus of the baby boomer generation, but there's also kind of a great exodus, or supposedly there's a great exodus going on right now with people leaving the workforce just in general. Have you guys noticed that? Is it true, or is it just demand has spiked so much that everyone feels it?
It certainly feels like it, right? And I don't know if it's just because there are more jobs than there are people right now, or if there's more jobs because there's more people because people are leaving the workforce. I just know there aren't enough people, regardless of the reason behind it.
Yeah, I guess the thing, regardless of what the underlying cause is, whether we're talking about trucking specifically, which, don't worry guys, we'll get there. Everybody needs employees right now. That you can't argue that fact. Everywhere you go, help wanted signs are everywhere.
Well, I think if you look at the number of women specifically that had to leave the workforce because of the pandemic to deal with children, and traditionally, obviously there were some men that did that for their families as well, but we lost a lot of women in the workforce, and that's a huge impact. But also, people have had to make choices. What would work? What won't work for our family, and can I get the right shift or things so that we have coverage? There are a lot of families who are the parents are meeting in the driveway at the shift change, right, to swap what's going on, and they're having to work hard to make ends meet. And so when they have choices, they're going to take those, and they're going to take them quickly. We're seeing people pivot more. So I don't know that there's necessarily less people per se. I think that's part of it, but also people are changing a lot more. So we're seeing that cycle happen faster than we normally would. You're not having an employee for 18 to 24 months. You might have them for 6 or 3, especially in trucking.
All right. Well, let's shift to trucking. Now, you guys have had experience hiring truck drivers in the past, but now that you're more extensively within the industry, working with fleets on a day-to-day basis, let's start with what is different about trucking. What is different about trucking employment than other industries, if anything?
I think there's a lot around technology and the way that we process candidates through the systems that is lagging compared to some of the other things we're used to. So what we find is when we work with just mainly fleets alone, that's lagging. When they're a corporate and we're helping them with drivers as well, then you might see something different. But there's problems with that as well. So when they hire from a corporate perspective, a more, I would say, sophisticated or more steps, they're not doing the background checks and things up front, whereas in fleet hiring they are. So drivers aren't used to how corporates hire, and then how drivers are being hired in fleets isn't necessarily the most sophisticated. But it's working. We just have to do better.
Right. What would you add to that?
I mean, I agree wholeheartedly, right? It's the technology and how you're engaging with the drivers. You think about it, they don't have a laptop sitting in front of them all day, right? They don't have access to what you would think of a more traditional role would have. So making sure that there's mobile optimization available to them, and that it's efficient for them, because they don't have either the wherewithal or the ability to sit down and spend 45 minutes filling out an application. So just being cognizant, I think, of people's time
Right.
and how much energy and effort it takes to begin the process, but then also, as you're going through it with the interview phases and the offer phases and the background phases, just be cognizant of that, that urgency and that speed to offer, because they've got multiple offers out there. So the best offer isn't necessarily the one that gets accepted. Typically, it's the first offer that gets accepted.
Can either of you share a quick anecdote or story about something you've come across already with fleets where it's like the technology side of it? Just kind of in accordance to what you were just saying.
Yeah, so we have some systems where the application is difficult. It's not mobily optimized, and so that is difficult for us. We're tracking drivers down. Sometimes drivers are like, oh, I'm going to have my partner or spouse, or wife, whoever, fill it out for me, and then, we have that delay. So there's that. I think there's also just how we reach out to drivers. They're getting so many text messages and things like that, so we have to make sure what we're doing is impactful and that they can actually get to it. So sometimes it's the time of day that you're reaching out. They have to be parked. They have to be able to talk, because they're not supposed to be doing that while they're driving, right? So we have to make sure that we're meeting them where they are and when they can do it.
All right. So maybe even specifically beyond what we're talking about, what is something that you see consistently that fleets are, you bring all this extensive experience outside of the industry. What is it from that perspective do you see that a lot of fleets are getting wrong when it comes to hiring drivers?
I think for me, it's the humanization or the lack of compassion around the process, especially when you figure how much work it takes to get a driver at this point, and how hard you're working from a sourcing perspective all the way through the recruiter time, the hiring manager time, and then they maybe even accept the job. Then they get to orientation, and that experience could be really uncomfortable or not polished, and the handoff could be clunky, where the orientation person has no relationship with this candidate. So when they show up, they're feeling a huge disconnect.
Right.
And so I think that's part of it, is really remembering that each person, again, not a commodity, they're a human being, and how they're going to feel and that experience all the way through the process has to be something that's front of mind.
Okay, what would you add to that?
I would say just understanding that that driver is interviewing the fleet manager or the freight manager in whatever particular instance. The driver's interviewing them to understand about the company and understand about the benefits and like, how am I going to be treated when if I come to work here, and just I think there's a lot more analysis or effort that goes into the candidate, making sure it's a good spot for them. Emily was talking about work-life balance and crossing paths in the night with your spouse and all of those different things. It's really just understanding it's not just about the job. It's so much more about how you're going to be treated outside of work, within the confines of your job, obviously, but just making sure that you really get a good match, so that you're not 2 months in, spent a bunch of money and time training somebody, and they're like, yeah, this just isn't in for me, so we go. So making sure it's a good fit on both sides, I think, is the key to making a good long-term match for somebody.
Okay. Well, you guys both run our Talent Partners division, so let's not hide the ball anymore. Let's go ahead and say what is Talent Partners at Randall Reilly? What is the service we're offering here?
So what we do is we work with people to help them streamline their processes. Fill jobs is the end result, generally speaking. That's the goal. Like, we're trying to get people in trucks. But ultimately, we're working with you holistically, from everything from the way you advertise and go to market, all the way through to how orientation works. So systems, outreach, the way that your workflows are. We're going to A/B test a lot of different things. So it's basically a partner, a true advisor for you and your business, as well as the execution arm of actually filling the roles.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would you add?
Our customers are able to rely on all of that experience, so we can hopefully help them navigate a little bit more efficiently through some of the potential pitfalls. You think about hiring is hiring. It doesn't matter if it's an engineer or a driver, right? You've still got steps in the process that you've got to complete. So we understand where some of those potential roadblocks might be before you experience them, right? So we're going to come in, we're going to analyze what you're doing, maybe make some recommendations, efficiencies that are available to them, and streamline it so that we can get to that hire as efficiently and as quickly as possible.
I always say that we learn exponentially because we get to look across a bunch of customers. So we have the aggregate of that experience. And so I always say we can learn it once, but across everybody. And then, we see those trends coming. The other thing is we're able to balance, the experimentation across a bunch of our customers and then bring best practices forward. So you get the benefit of that scope.
Okay, so I imagine when we talk about the scope of everything you guys are doing for someone you would partner with, or someone we would partner with, who all comprises that team? Like if I partner with you guys, what all am I getting?
Well, we're a lot of fun, first of all, so get
Okay.
that. You're welcome.
Fun.
And
Write
so,
that down.
come on over. But what we also get to do is, we have people that are segmented in the work. So if you think about how a factory line might be set up,
Right.
we try to get people who specialize in different things. So we have people who are really detail oriented, and they're going to do like the offer letters and the coordinating of interviews and scheduling and all of that. Then we have recruiters who are really selling your opportunity, and they're talking to people and interesting them.
Mm-hmm.
Then we also have a sourcing team that works behind the scenes. Randall Reilly obviously has a huge wealth of data and opportunity that we can learn from. And then we drive that specifically to each of our customers, and how we do that, partnering with the customer and their marketing and communications groups, as well as the talent acquisition groups. And then we have data people on our team. So
Right.
we call them the brains. They help us make sure what we're doing is actually working.
Okay.
And so we do a lot of A/B testing in that scenario. So there's a team that's scalable. You might have 5 recruiters, 2 sourcers, and a coordinator. It just depends on what you're hiring and how complex your process is. And then we titrate that over time. We just
Okay.
keep working with you and the team to see what you need. And if you scale up,
Yeah.
we're with you. And if you need to scale down, we can do that too.
So how far into the execution process do you guys go? As far as at what point are you handing off a driver?
It depends on what the customer wants. And so we can take them all the way through processing the background checks, getting them to orientation, and even afterwards, that 15, 30-day call, how's it going?
Yeah.
We can just do all the way up to just source and present to somebody, schedule the first interview. It just depends on the scope that we want. We love having the whole scope because then we can see more of what's happening and where those roadblocks are or potential bottlenecks. But again, the great thing about what we do is from an advisory perspective, we can do all or none, some, just depends on what you need.
What do you think are the biggest advantages to working with a partner like you guys?
I think Emily hit the nail on the head when she said we can look across all of our accounts, right? We can learn exponentially. And that is the key to being able to head off any potential problems that you might see. Because if something is, we can see trends, we can see, movement in the industry, and really figure out how do we best address that proactively rather than reactively, right? Mm-hmm. Emily has said it a couple of times. We want to be the trusted advisor. Because we do know this industry, right? We do know this business, and it's a lot easier for us to get the people moving through the process if we own the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Data-driven decisions, really try to remove some of the emotion from the conversations, because let's face it, recruiting is hard, right? It's not easy. That's why companies are outsourcing. That's why people are using recruiting companies to help fill their jobs, because you do need to put a lot of effort into it. So really being able to partner with somebody and become a part of their organization rather than just a vendor who's filling jobs. We want to come in and help you and learn from you and be able to provide you our expertise.
How extensive is the experience on your team? Because you have all these parts, and you got the data people and the people that actually have to talk to the drivers. How much experience is on the team?
I mean, everybody that we have now, we have some entry-level people that we're training as well, but they're behind the scenes, so they're learning. But we have people that have been in the industry as long as we have, and most of what I would say versus tenure is also reps, right? So we had teams that were filling 65,000 hires a year, so we're used to just that pace and energy and what we need to do, and we can apply that to niche hiring, or we can apply that to, wide scope. And so I mean, if you did in hours, or I don't know, thousands of hours, hundreds of years, if you combined us all.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is that we're building a team around what our customers need, and so we're bringing in specific driver recruiters where we need that, or we're building more talent advisory across from our own networks that we've grown.
If we look at the scope of everything you guys touch within the process, is there a specific area that you feel like, I mean, obviously probably the biggest advantage is the scope, right? But if we were to isolate an element within there, where do you think we create the biggest advantage for clients?
I think it's process design and making sure what you're doing is efficient and is getting you what you want out of your process and helping your brand, right? So we always remember that there's a brand as a whole and there's an employment brand. People going through your process may also be your customers. And so you really want to make sure that how they feel and how that looks to them makes them still want to be a customer regardless of the outcome of the interview. And so looking at the process, the experience and all of that, as well as obviously execution's expectation.
Yeah.
Right. There's not a negotiation point. If we're not filling the jobs, that's not it. But it's how we do it and how that helps propel your brand that I think is critical.
Yeah, and another thing I just thought of while you were talking to me, I was listening to, but I was also thinking.
Sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was thinking about, we were talking about TikTok, and we shot an episode on TikTok, and people get a lot. Like, I think a lot of times people that are in recruiting, especially drivers, are always like, should I be on TikTok? Should I be doing this? I'm not keeping up, all this kind of stuff. Having a partner like you guys kind of mitigates that fear a little bit because it makes it your job to keep up with the trends and your job to make sure that we're on TikTok the way that we should be.
I just to add on to that last question, I think, we talked a lot about the candidate. I think it's also focusing on the hiring manager experience too, right? Like if you're a freight manager, how much time do you have to be able to dedicate towards filling your empty trucks? Your expertise is in logistics, supply chain. Our specific talent is in recruiting. So for us to be able to focus on the recruiting frees the freight managers up to run their facilities, and it's just when people focus on what they do best, you generally will have a better outcome.
Yes. All right. My final question, and it's a doozy. So you guys have been here for a while now. You've been doing it, making it happen. How's it going?
Well, I think it's going well, right? It can always go better. We've learned a ton about the industry. We've been able to apply our past experiences. And I think at this point in time, I would say we're in a good spot to really have a fantastic 2022 and beyond.
It's working. I can tell you that.
Yeah,
it's happening, so that's the good news. I think we're starting to see the gains now.
Right.
So at first it was like, okay, how do we get started, and how do we get some of those proofs of concept? Now we have so much stuff that we can use to tell future customers and current customers about how much better we're getting. We're reducing submit to hire. We're getting more efficient, and we're just having fun doing it too. I think the other thing I would say is that this is a great place to work. We had a lot of choices too. We were just talking about everybody having choices. We certainly had choices when we were making these decisions, and we just had a bunch of new people start on the 22nd of February, and they're already so excited. They keep saying like, thank you so much for having this opportunity. This feels like a family. It feels like it's working. This team is really focused and they want to win, and we're only going to get bigger. And so I feel like what's great about the overall partnership with Randall Reilly for us is that we have so much more information than a normal talent partner or talent acquisition support team would have just about this industry. And so we're just able to execute faster and better, and we're having a good time.
All right. Well, I think we'll end it there. I have no idea what episode this is, but it was a good one.